All right. So our last little thing about static methods is you might ask the question, well, can another method besides main, because right now all our method calls are in main, could another method call another method? Could any method call a method? The answer to this question is yes, sure. Why not? Whenever a method call is encountered, it just pauses wherever it is, goes to that method body, runs all the code there, and comes back. So it can do this in any method. You know, you can have a method inside of a method inside of a method. You can have method calls going forever, right? In fact, if you do have method calls going forever, then your program will run forever and your computer will never work unless you stop the program, right? So that's, that's a bad thing, but it's something that that you can do, and it's called an infinite method call, right? If like method A calls method B, which calls method A, which calls method B, which calls method A, and it goes back and forth, and it just never leaves. It's like it's caught in an infinite loop. But here's an example of how you could have a method calling another method. Okay, so here's two method declarations. One of them is called method 1. The other one's called method 2. We got 1. We got 2, this way, 1 and 2. It's a mirror for me, so it's messing me up. And which of these methods is calling one of the other methods? And it's method 1, right? Method 1 is calling method 2. Wait. Method 1 is calling method 2. And where is it calling method 2? Well, it's its second statement. Ooh, let's get that red. It's the second statement inside method 1. It says, hey, method 1, pause where you are. Stop, wait a minute. Go over to method 2 and run all of the code in method 2, and then come back and finish what you're doing. So, question for you guys. What do you think the output of these two method calls, one after the other, method 1 followed by method 2? So if this was our two lines of code inside main, if we have our main method and we had, a call to method 1 followed by a call to method 2, what output would we see to the console? So you could type this up yourself if you wanted to. You could write it in the 2boxes class, or just try to think, well, how do you think this might work? How might the code run if methods behave how we think they should behave? And if you pause and think about it for a second, write down what you think the answer is, and then I'll walk through what happens and how the program actually functions. Okay. Alright. So, here's our answer. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to call method 1, right? And so when method 1 gets called, my fancy laser pointer, when method 1 gets called, we're going to run over to the first line in method 1, which is a println, and it says starting method 1. So here's the first line of output we get, starting method 1. So what happens next? Well, we call method 2, right? This is the next line. So we're going to say, hey, method 1, stop where you are. We're going to go run method 2. So we bounce down to method 2. And that first thing in method 2 is the line starting method 2. And then we execute the next line in method 2, which says done with method 2. Okay, then we are done with method 2, right? There's nothing else inside method 2, so we hit its closed curly brace. And where were we, right? We were paused right up here, right? We were at method 2, and so we're going to go to the next line down, which is done with method 1. So let's walk through this one more time. It was a little confusing. So we started with the first line in method 1. we called method 2, which then went down and did this first line of method 2 and the second line of method 2. Then we were done here. We went back, and then we did the last line of method 1. So this was the flow. We went 1, we'll call this 1. So if this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we went 1, 2, 4, 5, 3, like that, in that order. Okay, so where were we? We were here. We were doing method 1. So we're done now with method 1. There's nothing left in here. So what happens next? We go to the next call. Next call, which is method 2. Okay, now method 2 doesn't call anything else. So when we call method 2, we just run through it, you know, and it's easy to figure out what it's going to do. When we call method 2, we're going to print starting method 2. Then we're going to print done with method 2. And then that's all the output because we have nothing left, right? So now we're done. So that's the answer. Starting method 1, starting method 2, done with method 2, done with method 1. Starting method 2, done with method 2. A little bit tricky. You might need to pause this one, rewatch it for a second, and follow through again line by line. Doing this, following the code line by line, is very helpful when you encounter confusing code, okay? And this is called code tracing. We are tracing out the steps that the computer is running. And if you ever get a little bit confused by what's the computer actually going to do, what's the output, it's useful to do this code trace, to trace it by hand and say, okay, where are we going, what are we doing, what are we doing? So, following along, okay? All right. If you're curious about some problems that kind of highlight some of the things we talked about, or some of the things I talked about in this lesson, some of the things we've covered, in Practice It, you can try some of these self-checks, problems 1.21 through 1.28, and exercises 1.7 and 1.8 give you some practice writing methods and chunking the code down into methods and calling them. So remember to like and subscribe, and hopefully this was a good video. I'm just kidding, you don't have to like and subscribe. You should subscribe though, because then you get notifications when I upload these videos. So anyway, I'll see you guys next time.